Hello, my name is Sheila, and I'll be taking you through the nouns and the functions that noun functions. So today we're just going to look at the function of a noun as a subject and that of an object. So what is a subject? We're going to start to the subject. So what is a subject? A subject is a thing or a person performing an action in a sentence or a clause. So when you speak, the person who is doing an action is the subject in that statement or sentence. When again a thing is performing a certain action is also considered a subject. So it's also important to note that subjects can either be human, just things or animals. So we're going to look at some of examples of subjects in sentences. Like, for example, John kicked the ball. John, in this instance, is our subject, for he is performing the action kick the ball. Another example is Mary ate her lunch. So Mary is the subject because she is the one performing the action of eating. Okay? So we can also have a subject as a thing. Like we can say the bed was thrown into the ground. So the bed fell. The bed. Mm, mm. So yeah. So let's continue. The other function of a noun is the object function. So let us start by defining what an object is. An object is, wait a minute. An object is a receiver of an action performed by a subject. So for it to be an object, there has to be a subject which is performing an action. So the questions that we answer, and we have different objects. We have direct objects and indirect objects. So number one, you're going to look at the direct objects. So direct objects these are the receivers of an action in a sentence or a clause. So mostly these are nouns or noun phrases that the subject that these receivers are mainly nouns or noun phrases. And they answer the question what or whom. So if the receiver of the question answers the question what or whom, then that's our direct object. And you must also know that not all sentences require a direct object, especially those with linking verbs. We'll deal with linking verbs later, but just note that not all sentences require a direct verb. Yeah, not objects. Not all sentences require a direct verb. So we also have another point to note is they are preceded, these direct objects are preceded by the subject that performs the action to the direct object. So what am I saying? That for you to have, for they are preceded, direct objects are preceded by the subject that performs the action to the direct object, meaning that the subject must come first, which is performing an action that is a verb onto or will be affecting, which affects the direct object. For example, So in these sentences, we are going to identify the direct objects. Sentence number 1, Paul is dusting the rug. Our direct object here is Paul. So these are the sentences that we're going to look at to identify the direct objects. The visitors are going to church. The visitors are the subjects, which are performing the action of going. And where are they going? To where are they going? That is to church. That is our direct object. He kicked the neighbor's cat. Sentence number 2. He is the subject. Kicked is the verb, the action that the person is. James kicked the neighbor's cat. So James is the subject, kicked is the verb or the action that James is doing, and the receiver we're going to look at examples of direct objects in sentences. So for example, you can have a sentence like Mary ate her pineapples. Mary is the subject who is performing the action eating. What is she eating? Pineapples. So pineapples is a direct object. We can also have a sentence such as the taxi driver fell into the ditch. The taxi driver fell into the ditch. The taxi driver performed the action of falling into the ditch. So the ditch is the direct object. Another sentence we can have, we can say that the cat lost its meat. I can't lose it. Another example is the dog chased the neighbor's cat. The dog chased the neighbor's cat. So we have the cat being the direct object because it received the action of chasing from the subject dog. So the dog is the subject, the verb is chased, and the direct object is you got it right. It's the direct object. We can also have examples such as Paul cleaned the dishes. Paul is the subject, verb is clean, and then you also now the direct object is dishes. You can feel free to have your own sentences or to comment down below examples of sentences and try to identify each of the categories as you've just learned. So we also have another category of objects, which is indirect objects. So these also signals or shows the recipient or receiver of the direct objects. In this, you have to have, when you're talking about indirect objects, indirect objects, indirect objects. So indirect objects also perform the function of an object, but in this case, the receiver receives the action of the direct object. Okay? So by this, it is clear that independent objects cannot be present where there is no direct object. So for it to qualify as an indirect object, there has to be the presence of a direct object. So Also, it is also important to note that most of indirect objects are either nouns, pronouns, or noun phrase. Okay, so we're going to look at different examples and to identify the indirect objects in those sentences. So, for example, we can have a sentence like, kindly pass the soap. Wait, no. Examples of sentences where we're going to identify indirect objects are: number one, Peter passed Jane the food. So Peter is the subject who is performing the action passed, which is a verb, the food, which is the direct object, but to who? To Jane. So Jane is the one who is affected by the action of the subject. Okay. So to make us understand better, we're going to also have another sentence. So Paul, in this sentence, we have Paul told James a story. So Paul is our subject who is performing the verb, the action told. A story, which is the direct object, but to who? Who was the story told to? James. So James is the one who is receiving the action of the direct objects, a story. The other way to understand indirect objects is we can ask ourselves who is affected by the action of the direct objects. So, for example, in those sentences, Jane is affected by the action of Peter passing the food. She received the food. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So Peter received the no. Another example of an indirect object in sentences include, my grandmother baked us a cake. So the cake is our direct object and us is our indirect object because we are receiving the action of the direct object, cake. The cake is made for us. Another example includes, the cat ran with Grace out of the house. So the house is the direct object as it is affected directly by the verb or the action of the subject cat, and Grace is the indirect object in this sentence. So you can comment down below examples of sentences and identify all functions of the nouns in the sentences. So that's it for today's lesson. And just to remind you, we've talked about nouns and the different functions of the nouns. Function number one we looked at is noun performing the function of a subject and also that of an object. And under object, we also learned about direct and indirect objects. So I'd like you to go through the notes, the video and the notes, and come up with different examples and identify the functions of each noun in your sentences. So until next time.